The Expertbook branding on the Expertbook P5 represents Asus's pitch at business laptop buyers, so it's no real surprise that the P5 has a rather more sedate design than you'd find in, say, any of its ROG or ZenBook or VivoBook lines. Unopened, a small rectangular badge sits on the rear of the laptop, making it look somewhat like a business card, and that's probably not accidental. Measuring in at 31.2 by 22.3 by 1.645 centimeters with a carrying weight of 2.29 kilos, it's not in the true super light, super thin class of laptops, and again, that's all part and parcel of its more general business look. Open it up and you're faced with a 14-inch, 2560 by 1600 pixel, 144Hz capable LCD display, with slightly prominent top and bottom bezels. That top bezel does allow space for the integrated 1080p webcam. That webcam has support for Windows Hello unlocking, and during my testing that's worked pretty well. You do also get a physical sliding privacy shutter, which I do like having rather than a digital or software one, though it's not the most obvious unit, thanks to itself being rather dark against that black background. I'll generally favour units that use a sharper colour contrast, like a red, for example, to make it more apparent to you when you've got privacy enabled or disabled, though physically, of course, it actually works fine to block the shutter. The Expertbook P5's keyboard is well built with decent travel on each keystroke. If I've got one complaint, and it is a very small one, it's that the cursor keys are rather squashed together in the lower right-hand corner. They also do double duty as function-enabled home, end, and page-up, page-down keys. In fact, there's a lot of that going on this keyboard, but that's fine. There's only so much space on a 14-inch keyboard, of course. The Expertbook P5 follows a familiar trend in laptop design where most of the ports are clustered on the left-hand side of the laptop. That's where you'll find dual Thunderbolt 4 USB-C ports, HDMI, a single USB-A port, and a combo headphone jack. Whereas on the right-hand side, you just get a single USB-A port and a Kensington lock port. All of this fits together fairly well. The screen is reasonable and responsive, up to 144Hz refresh rates. Not exactly gaming quality there, but then this isn't a gaming PC, it's a business one, and in business, power matters. Now, the Asus Expertbook P5 is a Copilot Plus PC, and to date, that's been a category of Windows 11 notebooks that's been dominated mostly by ARM-based Qualcomm Snapdragon X Elite and Snapdragon X Plus systems, but of course, they're not the only processors playing in the Copilot Plus pool anymore. The Asus Expertbook P5, loaned to me for review, runs on an Intel Core Ultra 7 285V processor with 32GB of RAM and a 1TB SSD. There is some variance in the P5 range with options for 16GB of RAM or 32GB of RAM, 512GB or 1TB of storage, and a variety of Intel integrated Arc GPUs. What I've tested here is pretty much, as far as I can see, the top of the range for this particular model, which makes it officially the Asus Expertbook P5405CSA. Doesn't that just roll off the tongue? Now, the launch of x86-based Copilot Plus laptops like the P5 was meant to bring with it improved performance without sacrificing too much battery life, but how does that actually stack up in real-world performance? So to compare that, I ran PC Mark 10 and 3D Mark TimeSpy over the P5 to see how it compares against other Copilot Plus ARM-based laptops and other similar business-centric models sporting similar CPU architecture. So first up, let's have a look at the PC Mark 10 figures, noting, of course, there are no Snapdragon figures here because at the time I was testing them, as far as I know, still to this day, but certainly at the time I was testing them, PC Mark 10 did not run on ARM-based architectures. The difference there between the Asus and the Acer is not significant enough to be worth sneezing over. Even the OmniBook Ultra Flip there does fairly well. And all three, of course, are perfectly suitable business machines in this case. Flipping over to the GPU, here the Expertbook P5 does rather well. And here, of course, I can bring the ARM-based Copilot Plus PCs into play, and you see the big difference in GPU performance. Not that this is pitched, of course, as a gaming machine, but obviously if you did have to do calculations or work that involved leveraging that GPU, then having that additional power there would be quite welcome. The Asus Expertbook P5 is also Copilot Plus ready for your AI needs. And look, I'm on the record here as being more of a fan of human-produced words, but I can't ignore that there absolutely is a business case for some level of AI integration into people's workflows, along, I feel, with some level of human interactions, because AI hallucinations are still very much a thing. But you do get Microsoft's set of AI integrations to push that internal NPU for matters like live translation and image generation, At the time of recording this, Microsoft's rather more controversial recall feature is still in testing, but to be clear, if it were live, beyond making sure it actually functioned, I'd personally be disabling it on any work PC I happen to be using for the sake of security. Now, the natural advantage, of course, with having a Copilot Plus PC running on x86 rather than ARM is that you get full Windows app compatibility rather than having to rely on the Windows Prism emulator to manage those apps. And speaking of apps, Asus goes relatively lightweight here when it comes to pre-installed apps on the Expertbook P5. McAfee antivirus is installed for your antivirus needs, or uninstalled depending on your preferences for that particular software, and you get a range of Asus AI-centric business applications. This is a business laptop, and that's actually quite appropriate. Most businesses don't want to have to deal with the fuss of uninstalling all those additional apps anyway, so this is to be applauded in the main. The flip side, of course, of the use of x86 is whether or not it's more power efficient, because that's where ARM is meant to shine. And look, I've long grown used to the somewhat hyperbolic claims that laptop manufacturers will make around the battery capabilities of the machines, and for about the same length of time, I've long generally been disappointed. Asus makes the very, very hyperbolic claim of up to 28 hours of battery life for the Expertbook P5, and look, if that pans out, it'd be one of the longest lasting laptops I've ever tested, hands down. Quick spoiler, it doesn't. Although the battery life of the Asus Expertbook P5 is still quite decent. Now, laptop usage will always determine overall battery life, and everyone's usage varies, which is why when I test laptops, I do so with one soft video test and one harder synthetic benchmark test to give me a range of usage. Basically, the soft test, which involves running a 1080p video full screen to the point of battery exhaustion, gives me a best use case scenario, and the harder test, in this case it's PC Mark X's gaming battery test, gives me a worst case scenario. Again, not a gaming laptop, but that's quite a good test for providing a consistent heavy load to a laptop. So, how does the Expertbook P5 stack up? I should note here, of course, that PC Mark X's gaming battery benchmark, again, does not run on those Snapdragon X processors, which is why there's only one score for those. But while the Expertbook P5 can't compete with the best of the ARM-based Copilot Plus PCs as yet, and yeah, not a shock, battery life is pretty much the reason why you might want an ARM-based Windows 11 PC in the first place, it does acquit itself quite well amongst its x86 brethren, though nowhere really near that claimed 28-hour battery life figure. There's still quite solid scope here for good all-day business battery life, given that it did hit over 13 hours of sustained video playback. So if you didn't need it for more processor-intensive work a lot of the time, it is almost certainly going to make it through your working day. Recharging the Expertbook P5 is via USB-C with a small supplied 65-watt charger in the box, and it works fine, although honestly, during my review period, I used a number of other PD-compliant chargers with the Expertbook P5 because that's very much the beauty of USB-C PD charging. So should you buy the Expertbook P5? Well look, as a straight-up Windows laptop, the P5 isn't exactly fancy, but that's not what it's for. It's a business-centric model with an AI focus, and if that's what you're after, it's got a decent mix of power and performance, along with a solid enough build for most purposes. It doesn't quite live up to Asus's hefty battery life promises, but then very few laptops do, while avoiding the ARM compatibility issues of many Copilot Plus laptops.